Gators Breakdown episode 118 is ready to go. The Gators get their head coach as Dan Mullen returns to Gainesville to lead the Gators. I'm your host, David Waters on Gators Breakdown. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SCC. And joining me tonight are both co-hosts, Bill Sykes. You can find Bill on Twitter at RealBSykes. And Will Miles. You can find Will on Twitter at WillMilesSCC. Guys, what a crazy last few days from Chip Kelly being a done deal to Chip Kelly signing with UCLA. Florida getting beat by Florida State, and it all culminating on Sunday as Florida hires Dan Mullen. I know we've been kind of busy with everything, the season wrapping up, our personal lives, but I'm not going to lie. We'll dive into it, but this one kind of caught me by surprise a little bit on Sunday morning.
Yeah, a little bit, man. I tweeted out this when the whole Kelly thing went down that, Strickland needed to act decisively because time is of the essence. We've seen these dominoes fall in a day, and in the case of Tennessee, the dominoes stand them back up. But, you can't sit around. You got to make your move, and he did that. I know not everybody's on board with it, but he went out and he made a boss move. He said, "Here's your money. Let's go. I got to have a coach."
Nah, I'm just glad it didn't take a week and a half for Mullen to decide he wanted to be a Gator like we had to deal with the last couple of weeks. But no, I mean, obviously it was very, very quick, very, very quiet, and sort of a welcome change from what we've seen, or at least what we saw through the Kelly escapade.
I'm kind of lucky that I'm here, I guess, because my wife has just been on me about not putting my phone down. Luckily, I got the new iPhone, so the battery lasts a while. I can get that, but she's about ready to kill me. So this coaching search being over will let me be back with the family a little bit more. We've been moving and had a lot of stuff to do. And tell you what, I couldn't stay off my phone, but we finally got at the end here with the hiring of Dan Mullen a little bit, and we'll talk about it more in some future episodes. But man, I just want to play some video games too. So that was my plan on Sunday night, and Sunday comes, and Dan Mullen is Florida's head coach.
Here we are, man. The saga is finally concluded.
Yeah, man. Maybe we can score. That's all. That's the only thought I had is, can the dude score points? And really, sort of the saga's just starting because now we get to break down whether he can improve the offense. So.
That is true. We will not be breaking down Florida's defeat to FSU. We'll be moving past that. This season is over with.
I'm like that guy on that Westworld. Like, what door? Like, what are you talking? What game are you talking about, Dave?
Okay, yeah. What happened? I have no idea. Luckily, that is over. No more Doug Nussmeier. No more Jim McElwain's.
Whatever that was.
Whatever that was. We can move on.
Whatever adjective you want to loosely throw out there.
All right. Remember, you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites to get the links by following Gators Breakdown on Twitter and on Facebook at Gators Breakdown. Hey, look, when you're on iTunes, please rate and review the show. Let Gator Nation know what they're getting with Gators Breakdown. So, guys, I mentioned how it all came down a little bit. Pete Thamel of Yahoo kind of was the first one to report it on Sunday. Kind of surprised everyone after the Chip Kelly fiasco. But he says Florida touched base with Dan Mullen on Friday following the Egg Bowl loss to Ole Miss. The school had conversations with Chip Kelly, as we know, of course, and Scott Frost, who both indicated better fits may be available at a place other than a high-profile SEC school. And then Trey Wallace, we've had discussions with him out there on Twitter. He's followed his coaching search pretty closely as well, and especially from the Tennessee side, tweeted that both Florida and Tennessee were trying to get Mullen to sign yesterday. That would have been Saturday, when Dan told Jimmy Sexton, the agent, he'd rather take the Gators job. John Curry moved on. John Curry is Tennessee's athletic director. Moved on to Greg Schiano. Tennessee had a conference call with Mullen and his reps in the middle of the week. Then the Gators got involved after Scott Frost said no. So that come from Trey Wallace there. Guys, I don't think there's any surprise after Chip Kelly and what happened with UCLA that Dan Mullen's name would have been one to creep up as a familiarity with AD Scott Strickland.
Yeah, I think you have to look at this in some ways as very much not a surprise. I've kind of been one that expected him to maybe swing for the fence a little more as far as an up and comer, and that part of that just because it's been the pattern. Dan Mullen, in some ways, appears like a very safe pick, but as we're going to get into, there is a lot of upside and a lot of like here. So, I think that it's going to be a little bit divisive, I think, amongst the Gator fans, but he's a guy that could be in store for big things here.
Yeah, and based on some of the rumors that we've heard about what Frost is asking for, I think maybe they just decided they'd rather go with somebody who's got a proven track record rather than swing for the fences with someone who doesn't have a proven track record if it's going to cost them the same amount of money. And certainly Frost has other options as well. And maybe it just turns out that Nebraska or staying at UCF is the option he wants to stick with. But it also sounded like it was going to take a pretty decent sized truckload of money to get him to move. And is it really worth it for a guy who has 2 years of head coaching experience?
And one of those, it's a good season.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, this year is the year, so you could say, it's year 2 and year 1. He was Scott Frost was able to build off of that. But, I mean, hey, look, we also followed the timeline a little bit, and late Saturday night, we got to watch it, and, Willie Taggart's name came up as well. And I've had some sources and all that. If all it was going to take is for Florida to offer him the job, and he would have been the next head coach of Florida. So if you kind of follow a timeline here, fans got excited as soon as Jim McElwain was fired. There was a list of coaches that were put out there, led by Scott Frost. Then come along Chip Kelly. Once it kind of was known that he might want to get back into coaching a little bit, UCLA got him. Then we heard Mike Norvell, and then Willie Taggart's name started coming up. And really on Saturday evening, Taggart's name was the hot name, one that I kind of expected to maybe come out of this where Florida would offer him the job. But like I said, it was kind of a surprise on Sunday that Dan Mullen got the job. But, Saturday night, what I was hearing and a lot of people were saying, kind of close to the situation with Taggart, is all it would take was him to be offered, and he would have been the next head coach at Florida.
Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, I mean, I think Taggart is a reasonable pursuit, but I don't know that he's got a record that indicates he's that much better than Mullen. I think Mullen actually is sort of at a disadvantage. You see this a lot with guys who come back for an extra year of college and then get picked apart by NFL scouts, and everyone goes, "Oh, well, he didn't improve from year 2 to year 3." Well, yeah, in year 2 though, he was really, really good. And Mullen's been at Mississippi State since 2009. And if you'd looked at his track record in 2012 or 2013, he would have been a fairly attractive hire coming out of Mississippi State, because the comment really would have been, look at what he's building there. He's about to break out. And now you look at it and we're in 2017 and he hasn't really had that breakout season. He's been 8-4 for a lot of those years, but he's also been 8-4 in a division where he has to play Alabama and Auburn every year. And no one is beating Alabama right now the way they're built with Mississippi State's roster. I just don't think that's a reasonable thing to ask.
Hey, it's not just Alabama, though. Let's remember, you've got 3 teams in that division that have won national championships in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
It's one of those moments. Let me just say that again. 3 teams in the last 10 years from your division have won national champions. If you don't bring your A game every week and they don't fumble 4 times, it's over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was going to get into that too. Of when we go, what's the good about Dan Mullen and what's the bad about Dan Mullen, and I'll get into to that part of it as well. But Florida did officially release a statement, actually pretty much an article about Dan Mullen himself. The official release: University of Florida Athletic Director Scott Strickland announced that Dan Mullen will be the 27th head coach in Florida football history. Mullen, who spent the past 9 seasons as Mississippi State's head coach from 2009 to 2017, returns to Gainesville, where he served 4 seasons from 2005 to 2008 as offensive coordinator and was a major factor in the program, winning 2 Southeastern Conference titles and BCS national titles during his tenure there. Quote from Dan Mullen: "Megan and I are very excited to get back to Gainesville and the University of Florida. I have such great memories of the championships we won during our time there, or time here, and have a love for Florida. We are happy to be coming back to such a supportive administration, staff, student body, and fan base, which is the premier football program in the country. We will give relentless effort in everything that we do on and off the field. Our commitment will match the passion that the Gator Nation has for this program. I strongly believe Dan is the most prepared candidate to have immediate and long-term success at the University of Florida, AD Scott Strickland said. Coach Mullen is one of the best offensive minds in all of college football and has an unbelievable track record in tutoring successful quarterbacks such as Alex Smith, Chris Leak, Tim Tebow, Dak Prescott, and Nick Fitzgerald. Coach Mullen would do a tremendous job in developing accountability and toughness through a well-coordinated strength and conditioning program. Dan will work closely with the coaching staff, academic advising staff, and administrative team to give every student athlete he coaches the opportunity to grow and excel at a high level athletically, academically, and socially. So, kind of to summarize it here, Mullen, 45, was honored in 2014 as National College Football Coach of the Year by the Maxwell Football Club. He also won honors as SEC Coach of the Year that year. His tenure with the Bulldogs saw the program ascend to a #1 ranking during the regular season, and he oversaw participation in a school record of 8 consecutive bowl games. Player development has been key to Mullen's coaching career successes. 22 Bulldogs have been chosen in the NFL draft under Mullen since 2010. Prescott becoming the highest drafted Mississippi State quarterback in modern NFL draft history when he went in the 4th round to the Cowboys in 2016. So, guys, he doesn't have the full backing of Gator Nation. We kind of briefly mentioned that. Now, don't get me wrong. Neither was Chip Kelly or Scott Frost. And Willie Taggart, like I said, was a hot name over the weekend. There was a huge split with his name, not so much with Chip Kelly or Scott Frost. But it is Dan Mullen who was hired, and there are many fans who are excited and many who are not. So we're talking about some good things that we can take away from the hiring of Dan Mullen. For fans, they're excited to point to how he was able to win at Mississippi State. It's a hard place to win as much as he did. He was National Coach of the Year, as I said, in 2014. They were ranked #1 that year. So this came also from that release from Florida. He developed a team that went from unranked to #1 quicker than any college football history. It was 5 weeks. The Bulldogs entered September 20th at #8 LSU, just outside the polls, led by Prescott. Recorded their first victory at LSU since 1991. Then they were #1 team for the first time in 80 years of AP polls, following wins over Texas A&M, #6 Texas A&M, and #2 Auburn. So, going back and looking at what he did at Mississippi State, and we've lined out reasons when you got to go against Alabama, when you got to go against Texas A&M, when you got to go against Auburn, you got to go against LSU, and you're the head coach at Mississippi State, winning as much as he did actually, to me, makes a statement.
Absolutely. So first, Coach, now I got this from poster EH on the Gatorbait boards, the 24/7 Sports Network. EH says that he's the first Mississippi State coach to depart with a better than 50% win-loss record since Darrell Royal, who only coached from the 1954 and 1955 seasons and left at 12-8. Mullen won 60% of his games there. As much as people like to point to Jackie Sherrill, achieving some of the same success there, yeah, he had a 10-win season. That guy left at basically a 500 record out there, plus 2 ties. So what he did was unprecedented there. And, it's just tremendous.
Yeah, and I think if you look at what he's done from the standpoint of bringing in blue chip players, I know, Bill, you'll probably get more into recruiting, but
just a little bit.
But a top 25 class, which is kind of what he averaged over his years there, really only places you 9th or 10th in the conference in the SEC, and he was much better than 9th or 10th in the conference. He averaged 7th overall as a conference finish. Finished 3rd, was the best overall in 2014. Basically, you would expect the team to be about a top 25 team. And when you look at the Football Power Index through ESPN, he averaged 31 over his tenure there at Mississippi State. And I think it really starts to show the stark contrast when you look at the differences between him and Sylvester Croom. So Croom's average recruiting ranking was 42, Mullins was 27. More than anything, though, you start looking at points per game. On the offensive side, Croom was 108th is what he ranked in the country. Mullen was 58th. And even on the defensive side of the ball, The defensive side of the ball from a points per game perspective, Mullen's average was 38th and Crooms was 62nd. So he improved both the defensive and the offensive sides of the ball. He improved the talent significantly there at Mississippi State, and they won more games than they lost. Certainly I think there are probably some fair criticisms about the teams that had Dak Prescott, just because Prescott was such a transcendent talent. And then he comes to the Cowboys and shows to be probably even better than we thought he was at the time that he was in college. And you wonder whether that might have been the time that Mississippi State had an opportunity to break through. But, I understand why some people would have reservations about Mullen, particularly considering that this is kind of a lateral move, you might say, for him. But at the end of the day, I wonder what would happen if you gave McElwain and Nussmeier Mississippi State's players from 2009 to 2017.
Oh man!
I think what you're telling me is Nussmeier was the offensive coordinator for Sylvester Croom.
Well, it is interesting because when you look at it, and year one's going to be a little bit interesting, but when you look, he went from basically 116th to 76th in points per game to 54th in his second year. So if Florida sees that kind of improvement on the offensive side of the ball, you're not necessarily, I don't think, going to have to worry too much about recruiting, because people are going to see the direction and the progress and buy in. And that was always one of the things with McElwain, is we weren't seeing any progress. So how do you buy in?
And just to add to that, when he walked away from there, he's got them in their 8th straight bowl game every year but the first year. He's the second winningest coach in Mississippi State history. And even though he is second, he averaged 7.6 wins a year, whereas Jackie Sherrill had more years, only averaged 5.1. He had 2 top 15 finishes there. He was number 15 in 2010 and then number 11 in 2014. That's tremendous for Mississippi State. 5-2 in bowl games. The 10-win season he had in 2014 was the third ever in their school's history. Like you said, 2014 AP SEC Coach of the Year. And, hey, you talked about defense. The guy has shown the ability to hire good assistants. He's hired good coordinators. He's got Jeff Collins out of there. He's hired Manny Diaz. Now they've got Todd Grantham. So, and we'll get into some of the staffing issues, but there's a lot of signs here between the development and the staffing and the production. It's a guy that looks a lot better suited to run a football program than Jim McElwain was. We still don't know that Jim McElwain's a bad football coach, but this job clearly was above him. It was beyond him. He couldn't keep up with the recruiting and the off-the-field stuff. This is a guy who's gone into the cellar of the SEC West, the shark tank that it is, and he's held his own, and he's tread some water out there. So with these accolades, with the success we've seen, I think we've got every reason to believe that he can be a good football coach at Florida.
Yeah, and there were things we talked about, the success he had. I mean, look, you put him in the SEC East, Mississippi State's probably playing in an SEC championship game somewhere along the way. So, we mentioned playing in the West, but look at his overall SEC record, and here's where people kind of start to worry about Mullen and some of the things that may not be up to par. His record versus the SEC at Mississippi State was 33-39. Like I said, that was a division dominated by Alabama, who he never beat at Mississippi State. But look, not many people have. You also have LSU, Auburn, Texas A&M, who recruit and have much bigger football budgets compared to Mississippi State. But also another complaint is, and I saw various records versus ranked opponents. So the one I went with, he was 7-31 versus ranked opponents. But people, I think, use different parameters out there of when they were ranked or what poll it was or whatever. So that's what I came up with. But if we're going to hold true to our motto, or some of our mottos, that stars matter, yes, coaching does too. There's a reason he struggled versus more talented teams. He just didn't. He didn't have the talent. He didn't have the horses, but still had Mississippi State competitive. I get the worry though of the overall SEC record and the record against ranked opponents. But I really think the caveat of being at Mississippi State is what held him back.
I think so too. And if I may add to that, Dave, you brought up the record versus ranked opponents, and you had 7 wins out of 32 tries, or 31. Excuse me, I had 7 out of 32, so we were one off on there.
Okay.
By my numbers, which would be worse for him because I showed it only winning 7 out of 32. He was 21.8% versus ranked opponents. Well, people were comparing that to Willie Taggart. And again, I've been a proponent of Willie Taggart. I think he would have been a good hire for Florida. I think Mullen's going to be a good hire for Florida. Well, Willie Taggart was only 3 out of 14. That's 17.6%. So Willie Taggart did well below by percentage than Mullen did versus ranked opponents. So his performance was not as good there.
And I think you also have to take into consideration who those ranked opponents are. I mean, I mentioned that with top 25 recruiting classes. So in 2016, he had the 28th ranked recruiting class in the nation. It was 11th in the SEC, and I guarantee you 5 or 6 of those were in the West. And so, is it reasonable to ask him to be? I mean, to be quite honest, based on the national recruiting ranking, Mississippi State probably shouldn't have been a ranked team much of the time anyway. They should have been right on that borderline between 25 and 30, and they're getting beat by a team that's ranked 15th. Well, they ought to lose. And every year they're playing a team that's ranked number 1 or number 2 because they're playing Alabama. So Auburn's been pretty good in that span. LSU's been very solid in that span. Ole Miss has been cheating in that span, and he's had to compete with that within the state. Allegedly, I guess. Allegedly. Ole Miss has been allegedly cheating, but that's in his state. So he's still pulling blue chip recruits in from the state of Mississippi, even though he's had to go up against Hugh Freeze and some of the allegations that have gone on there at Mississippi. So, I don't think this is a home run like I was saying it was with Chip Kelly. I mean, I looked at Chip Kelly and just said, yeah, offense is going to completely turn around. The guy's going to bring in unbelievable recruits. You look at his record, and every single thing that he touched while he was at Oregon turned to gold. I think you look at Dan Mullen and you go, wow, there's some real promise here, but there are still some questions. And I think that was true with every candidate who was out there other than Chip Kelly, which is at least the guys who we presume are available. And I think that's one of the things that probably drove Strickland to make this decision is that there were questions with everybody. So let's go with the devil you know rather than the devil you don't.
That's a good point, but I would also add that there were questions with Chip Kelly. I mean, we've heard rumors that he wanted all this control and didn't want the oversight and wanted kind of this absolute power. But this is a guy, like we've talked about, that he ran into GM trouble in the NFL and did not display the ability to handle situations like that. The guy ran into NCAA trouble at Oregon, and while I'm not trying to make that bigger than it is, it's still a compliance issue. It's something you have to handle off the field. And so you've got 2 examples in 2 different jobs where he had trouble. I don't know that was going to be a good fit. And so it's not like he was an automatic road to the championship and success and prosperity. And like you said, all these guys had questions, especially the ones that remained on the board. And so they went with the proven guy. And I don't want to sound like I've completely changed my tune. I felt like Taggart could have been the underdog, and we could have played that underdog role as a program. But I think this is a solid hire. Like you said, maybe not a grand slam, but I really, honestly, guys, everybody that's listening out there, you know me. I call it like I see it. I'm not going to let anything slide. If I start seeing problems with moves that are being made and if the stats aren't lining up, recruiting or whatever, I'm going to call it like I see it. But I think there's real reason for Gator fans to give this guy a chance, to have some optimism. I think this could be the start of something really good for the program.
No, I don't.
Okay, go ahead, Will. Go ahead.
Well, I don't disagree with you, Bill. I think my initial reaction was a little bit of disappointment. Maybe just because it's somebody I do know, right? And so the person's warts, and so you sort of gravitate towards looking at those. I think as I've looked a little bit closer at some of the stats, I'm a little bit more comfortable with the hire. The one thing I would say is that we're going to know year 1 and year 2 in recruiting, because I think he's an excellent coach, and so I think if he can bring in top 5 classes, then there's nothing to worry about. If he struggles on the recruiting trail year 1 and year 2, then the development may be slower than people necessarily want to see.
That's a great point. It's going to be key, and I think it's fair to say, look, when you check off the boxes here. We talked about the guy's a great quarterback developer, and we'll get into more of that, I'm sure. We've talked about the fact that he has competed in the SEC. We know he's familiar with Florida and the program, so he's going to bring a staff that we believe is going to have some recruiting ties to the state. There's a lot to like here, but one of the things that I like to see in a Florida coaching candidate is a guy that has proven he can be a championship-level football coach. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen him go out and win a conference. I think his best finish was second in the East one time, and he has lingered at 4th or 5th. Like I said, though, you got a lot of national championship level teams out there that just have gobs more talent than he had to work with. It didn't have the disadvantages of being the second most prestigious football program in the state of Mississippi, and then you're surrounded by the Sharks. So it's a contextualized story of success. It's a contextualized defense of the hire. I get that, guys. There are legitimate criticisms of this, but there's also legitimate reasons to think, okay, you know what? This might work.
Bill, did you get a chance? I mean, this probably might be more opinion too. Anyway, we have to go back and look at his time at Florida. But him recruiting the state of Florida. Do you have worries there about? We'll get into the staff later, but comparing the state of Mississippi to the state of Florida is not even comparable whatsoever. He did well recruiting that state. But just in your opinion, I guess I'll just ask your opinion: can he recruit the state of Florida well?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, because that's
one of the other worries that people have about him is recruiting the state of Florida itself.
Well, this kind of ties into I did some analysis on his recruiting at Mississippi State, and what I like to do, and what I was working on with Taggart and with Norvell and some of these other candidates and Frost is to see how did they impact recruiting. We talked about that a little bit on a couple of past episodes recently. Like, when they came in, where did their classes rank as compared to the classes of other coaches at that university? Because it shows the kind of impact they had on that. And when I looked at it, Mississippi State prior to him between 2002 and 2008, which was mostly the Kroom era, I get it, and there was some of Sherrill on the tail end of his career. They were averaging about 34 nationally. That's 34 nationally and about 8th in the conference. Well, when Dan Mullen came in, like Will said, he elevated the national rankings on average. He even pulled like an 18 class a couple of times, and they're ranked 15th in the nation right now, to where their average went up from 34 to 25 nationally. But you also saw the conference ranking drop on average from year to year from about 8.5 to just over 9. So they lost a spot under Mullen in the conference. Now, for one thing, Texas A&M and Missouri joined the conference during that time in 2012, I believe it was. But also, I think that's indicative that you saw the conference recruiting rise as a whole in those glory years of the SEC that we saw. And it might be fading a little bit in that star now, but it got a little tougher. So I don't know, honestly, that we can say he really made that much of a difference on the recruiting at Mississippi State. He certainly did better nationally. He had some passing the eyeball test here. Yeah, they had some good classes. He found some unheralded players, especially quarterback with Prescott and Fitzgerald, that really turned out spectacularly. But I don't know yet, because in as much as I'm telling the listeners right now that the numbers don't show a big spike, again, I'm not sugarcoating this. I'm not sunshine pumping, but it is a lot to ask when you say go into Mississippi, which is bordered by Louisiana and Alabama, and then Florida's right around the corner, to go in there. And then for that matter, Texas school is going to reach in there, and Georgia, to go in there as the 6th or 7th best team in your division in the SEC against those programs and to recruit well. And then you got Ole Miss to contend with in state. So I just don't know. The good news is we know that he's got some coaches on staff with Florida ties between Hevesy and Gonzalez and some of those guys. And if he retains a few on the current staff, I believe that they are going to have the connections in state, especially with his experience, to get it done. But we are going to have to find out a little bit about who he is as a recruiter.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, if you look at 2004 to 2008, and again, this is Kroom, but still, it's Mississippi State. So they averaged 2 blue chips, 4-star, 5-star players. And if you look at Mullen under his years from 2009 to 2017, they averaged 4. And they had a couple of years where they had 7. And in 2013, they had 5. So, from a national ranking, they raised the bar. From a conference perspective, maybe they didn't, but like you mentioned, A&M coming in. But really, a quality of player coming into the program was significantly improved. And I don't know necessarily that, A&M and Missouri joining, we're only going to pull talent out of Mississippi. So, we'll see. I think, some people have wanted to make comparisons to like James Franklin being at Vanderbilt and then going to Penn State. I've sort of talked about that a little bit in terms of Chris Peterson and going from Boise to Washington, and then Sarkisian going from Washington to USC. And then if you think of Washington as being a place where there isn't a whole lot of blue chip talent, Peterson is in that 3rd, 4th, 5th in the Pac-12. Sarkisian was in that same place. And then when he went to USC, all of a sudden he was the top dog and he was number 1 in the conference. the problem I have is that I'm not necessarily sure that Mullen can unseat Saban as the number one guy in the conference, and I'm not sure that he can unseat Smart as the number one guy in the East. And I think that's maybe where the apprehension on the recruiting comes from is, if he's third in the conference from here on out, that's probably good enough to compete every once in a while, but it's not going to be good enough to be the top dog in the East or the top dog in the SEC consistently like Florida was under Meyer or Spurrier.
I don't have the data to comment on whether or not they can keep you there consistently, but third in the conference is the magic number. It's the lowest common denominator so far for the playoff teams. And I know I keep coming back to that. So if we could get there, that's a benchmark we haven't met under McElwain. So I would love to see that, and it would be a positive step. The one thing I would add here, when we talk about them averaging, ninth in the conference, because there were some years that they were better than that, well, you have to run down the list there. Well, Alabama, perennial national title contender. LSU has been a perennial national title contender. It's won one while Dan Mullen was there. Well, actually, it was just before he got there. Auburn's won a couple of titles since then. Florida just won titles in 06 and 08. Georgia hasn't – they've had a long-term problem with living up to their potential, but they're also the fourth best talent state in America. And then Tennessee is in they won a title in 98, a national title, in an excellent talent state. And then Texas A&M is the top talent state in the country. So these are all schools that they're competing with for these conference rankings. Maybe I'm kind of shading on the side of the sunshine right now, but I feel like there's a legitimate reason for them to be hovering that level, even with Dan Mullen doing a good job. But like you said, we do have to find out, can he go toe-to-toe and prove that he's not just a good coach and a good recruiter, but a great one?
Yeah, and things and what he leaned on at Mississippi State too was he leaned on a lot of JUCO guys. And when you're at a lower tier school, you see a lot of lower tier schools do that, going to get JUCO guys. Hey, and it worked out for him. There was a lot of JUCOs that went through that program and played well for him. So I think that's something else that we have to look out for. Is he won't have to do that at Florida. I don't think he'll do that at Florida, but it will be something that he's been used to doing. And I don't necessarily know if he'll bring that over or not.
Yeah, I wouldn't suspect he would that much. You'll see him pepper the roster a little bit, but not a whole lot.
Especially early on, as he sees holes that have been left by the previous administration and sort of the drop off in talent that we've seen specifically over the last 3 years. I mean, if you look at the teams that Florida's going to have to compete against, I mean, Florida State, as much as people want to complain about Jimbo Fisher, has averaged a 4.7 in their recruiting ranking from 2011 to 2017. Georgia's 7.3, LSU's 6.1, Tennessee's 14.3. And Florida's 10.0. So this is from 2011 to 2017. So it's not a surprise that Florida is playing close games against Tennessee and losing pretty significantly to Florida State. Just the recruiting has not been up to par for those teams. I know, Bill, you talked maybe a couple of weeks ago about the differential between Florida and its rivals and how that switched when McElwain came into the program.
It did.
That's going to have to switch again with Mullen. And so I don't know that he necessarily has to be first in the country every year, bringing those top three classes, but he's going to have to be close because that's what Florida State's doing.
Yeah, this is going to be one of the key things to watch is, can this guy generate the hype? And as much as the whole brick by brick thing kind of fizzled at Tennessee and, you got Harbaugh with his continuous annex and it's not about how they say it and the quirky little messages and stuff, but we need to see these kids have become believers, and the fans and the boosters too. It all goes hand in hand. So we're going to find out, can this guy generate the buzz? He's not what I would call a splash hire. I don't think anybody really would, but you got a guy with a lot of potential. And if he can cross that boundary, and I think it all starts kind of like I think you said earlier on with show them some offense. If they can get a quarterback out there, whether that be Corral or whoever, and suddenly this offense sparks, there's a lot of people out there that are waiting to jump on that bandwagon. And I don't mean that like in a fan perspective, but I mean the recruits. They want Florida, they want their hometown school to be good and to believe in that so they can go there. They don't want to have to go to Alabama. Not all of them. They don't want to have to go to LSU or wherever. They want, in Florida State, they got their own problems right now. It is ripe for the picking. But the timing is right for Mullen if he can get it done.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we move on, remember, Gators Breakdown is brought to you by Morty, Morty, the newest and smartest way to get a home mortgage. If you ever bought a home, you know that the mortgage process can be some of the most confusing and painful hours of your life. I recently bought a house myself, and to find a lender that fits the needs for me and my family, doing all the research myself for rates took entirely way too much time. I really needed to find a way to make the process fast and worry-free. Morty makes it fast and easy. Morty not only simplifies the process, but they help you find the smartest mortgage that's right for you. Just input your information into Morty's secure website, and in less time than it takes to hear this ad, you can shop qualified rates from different lenders. With Morty, you'll get real loan options in minutes without ever being called or sold to by a mortgage broker. And by shopping loans from different lenders, you're able to pick the rate and term that fits best your needs. In addition to that, Morty can automatically generate a pre-approval letter online for you in minutes, which will help you speed up the home buying process and talk confidently to realtors and sellers. Morty wants to save you money. At Morty, there's no commission salespeople, so their experts exist solely to get you the best deal possible. If you ever get stuck or have questions, someone from Morty's team is always ready to assist you over real-time chat or on the phone. So whether you're a first-time home buyer looking to refinance or buying an investment property, head on over to trymorty.com/Gators to get started today. That's TRYMORTY, trymorty.com/Gators. Morty Inc. is a licensed mortgage broker, equal housing lender, www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org, 1429243. So, guys, we have brought up the staff that he is a hot. That's probably one of the hottest topics we have seen on social media when the announcement was made. And look, even guys that we thought might be coming to Florida is, hey, who will they be bringing with them? We've mentioned past guys that were at Florida before under Urban Meyer while Dan Mullen was here. Gonzalez, Hevesy. We'll kind of see, Grantham, the defensive coordinator, is not a very popular name around the Florida parts for obvious reasons. Everybody remembers the choke sign on the sideline as Chaz Henry, I believe it was, which kicks an overtime game-winning field goal against Georgia. Grantham's over there mocking him by grabbing his throat, telling him he's going to choke. So he's been defensive coordinator at Georgia, at Mississippi State right now. Was at Louisville before Mississippi State. I don't. We'll see. I think Hevesy and Gonzalez are kind of maybe two locks, I would say, that Mullen will be bringing over from Mississippi State. Grantham, I'm just not sure. I hear there's reports that he might be coming. But I don't know if Florida fans' thoughts will come into play here. They shouldn't. If Mullen wants to bring him, he should bring him. But I kind of would. I mean, here's the thing about recruiting as well. As we got to talking, Randy Shannon goes. Some recruits are leaving as well. I don't think you ever keep a coach for recruiting purposes. So if he doesn't need to be here, he can go as well. But Sider, one current staff member, I'd like to see stay. Everybody else can move on. But talking about the staff, I think we'll see some familiar faces, but also some new ones as well.
I do too. It's going to be interesting to see who they keep. I had been told, kind of during the whole Chip Kelly saga, that what they were looking to do was keep, 2 or 3 guys, depending on how that worked out. Shannon was one of the consistent names. Juwan Sider was a guy that was kind of 50-50 from what I'd heard, and heard a couple other names. And Corey Bell was one of the ones that I think people were intrigued by because of the recruiting, and they feel like maybe he's not becoming coach. I don't think we'll see more than that because I think it's going to get crowded in there just because I think Mullen's got a pretty good staff.
And it's interesting because I'm not sure that Florida's staff, at least over the last 3 years, has been all that dynamic from a recruiting perspective. And so what is the impetus to keeping those guys who, I mean, yes, they have some connections and some relationships with some recruits who are out there right now, but again, sort of the idea of a process, that the process is you bring in the best recruiters, you bring in the best guys for your system, and you use them going forward to build the program. If you use coaches who are already there, who haven't necessarily done a fantastic job with the recruiting, and just because they've built these relationships, then you've really sort of abandoned the process. So I'd like to see Mullen bring in the people that he's the most comfortable with, regardless of what the administration thinks. And I'm sure that was part of the conversations that he had with them. But I don't imagine you hand somebody the kind of money they're handing Mullen and then tie his hand behind his back and tell him he's got to hire your handpicked assistants. So I would expect a lot of the people that he's comfortable with to be the people who are coming to Florida.
Hey, one thing to watch out for here, the way he has his staff structured right now is I believe he doesn't have an offensive coordinator. I believe that both Hevesy, the offensive line coach, and Billy Gonzalez, the wide receiver coach, are both co-offensive coordinators. And I think what he did with that, and the reason he structured that, was he wanted those two guys on his staff, but they were guys that maybe were, borderline for promotion. And so it was a way to secure their employment, because Mullen is really the offensive guy. He's the guy that drives the offense, kind of like a Spurrier would have been. And so he has a quarterback coach, but when you don't necessarily have an offensive coordinator, and unless I'm wrong here, maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but if you got that, maybe one of those guys doesn't want to come or whatever, it might free him up if he wants to go chase those big assistants in recruiting and hand them that title to come in. Mario Cristobal would be one. I think he has that co-offense coordinator title in Oregon.
And Taggart calls the plays there.
Right. So it's that kind of situation. It gives you a little freedom and creativity to bring a guy in, give him a title, and add to your staff. Now, I wouldn't mind seeing Hevesy or Billy Gonzalez come in as part of the staff. They both got Florida ties. They know the program. Yeah. I think they've had pretty good success there. I'm just saying that's something to watch to see how he handles that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I want to go back to like Mullen a little bit anyway. And this kind of speaks to recruiting and how early on in his career at Florida too. I remember when Urban Meyer was first hired, and it was the wonder is, could his offense work in the SEC? And Dan Mullen was his offensive coordinator. And look, they made it work with Chris Lee. 2005, we know the first year there, it was a so-so offense. 2006 was kind of the same. But look, they knew how to get the ball in the playmakers' hands. And we really saw that in 2006 with the emergence of Percy Harvin. But also, you saw little things. And I would like to, I don't know if we'll ever know this, but I'd like to give Dan Mullen some credit. Go back to the first year, 2005. Florida has that bye week, and they insert Billy Lasco in as a fullback, H-back type, changes the offense a little bit. They get some more success. 2006, as I mentioned, you get the true freshman Tim Tebow, Percy Harvin coming in. They find a way to use Tebow as a third down and short, fourth down and short conversion. Use him in the red zone. Use him in short yardage goal line situation. He knew what to do with him. He knew what to do with Percy Harvin. He knew how to get the ball in his hands, even as a freshman. So one thing that we have, really just shouted from the mountaintop about this last staff that's now on their way out is not getting the ball into the playmakers' hands. That's not going to be a problem for Dan Mullen.
No, I think you're going to see a significant uptick on offense, because I do think that Florida has playmakers at a lot of those positions that, we saw it with Tony. I mean, when you got him the ball, it was an automatic 8 yards. When you got the ball to Malik Davis, it was an automatic 5, and they'd go long stretches without touching the ball. Even last year when they had the 3 running backs and they couldn't decide on who was going to be the guy to be the running back. And everybody could see that Scarlett was the guy who needed to be the running back. Now, he struggled in pass protection, so you could sort of understand maybe why he didn't get quite as many reps, but it just took them so long to identify who the guys were they wanted to get the ball to. And then once they finally did, it was like they'd get it to the one guy till he got hurt. And then they go, all right, well, now we have to find another guy to get the ball to. Like who can fill that role? I mean, you got 7 of them. I mean, so Massey's going to be around. You got Tony coming back. Conceivably, you could have Tony playing in the backfield as, we've talked a little bit about him being in a quarterback role, and you could have him play that Tebow role to start with. Obviously not as big, but certainly more dynamic. And so, you could adapt in that capacity. So all the things we've been asking for this entire year, I think are some things that we can probably see just with the current talent that's on the team.
And before Bill jumps in here, and I don't want to label this because we've labeled players this Percy Harvin role for a lot, but Mullen can maybe put Tony or someone else, in that Percy Harvin role, where if you want him in the backfield as a Wildcat quarterback, he can do it. If you want him to be as a wide receiver, he can do it. If you want him to be running back there, lining up beside the quarterback, taking a counter handoff, he can do it. And I think Dan Mullen can find ways to get a player like Tony the ball in his hands.
Yeah, I think he absolutely will. And he's like the one guy that can legitimately talk about the Percy role and the Tebow role because he was there with him,
Yeah.
And maybe, as a fan, and like I said, I admit I was a little bit disappointed because I was hoping they would swing for the fence, just like everybody else. But I think we've forgotten the fact that he engineered the offense that brought him those glory days there with Urban, and that's not something we should look as a small thing. I mean, it was huge, and it wasn't like he was just some token coordinator there, like if he might have had under Spurrier or something. I mean, the guy, he knows what he's doing. So, yeah, I think he's going to diversify the offense. I think he's going to focus on the playmakers. I think he's going to simplify it where it needs to be simplified. I think it's going to be fun.
Well, and you saw that when Mullen left. So he left to take the job at Mississippi State, and Adazio stepped in, and the offense became significantly less dynamic. Now, part of that was Percy Harvin was no longer around, and so certainly I don't think I don't think anybody needs to be reminded that that's a pretty big deal. At the same time, just the complaining about the dives into the middle started with Adazio as the offensive coordinator, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the fact that the imagination started to get stripped out of the offense probably happened because Mullen was leaving as well. So, obviously it's Urban Meyer's offense. I mean, that was the way it was sold when he was there, and I'm sure that was a large portion of it. But Mullen seems to have a creativity that Adazio didn't, and so if he can have creativity that McElwain didn't, then the players will be in a much better position to succeed.
Maybe looking back, if they do a documentary about Florida football, they'll refer to the last 9 years as the less dynamic era.
But look, I mean, we always talk about, Florida hasn't had a quarterback since Tim Tebow. But look, I mean, we also forget that Dan Mullen was part of that. And
yeah, maybe we haven't had an offensive coordinator since then.
There you go. That was my point. No, not only have we not had a quarterback, we haven't had an offensive coordinator either. So,
well, I mean, so it sounds like Kurt Roper may not be long for South Carolina either at this point. So you figure Charlie Weiss,
I never saw that one coming.
Brett Pease and Doug Nussmeier are the last 4 offensive coordinators. So maybe the Mullen hire isn't the most important part. Maybe the offensive coordinator is the most important part, or at least him being the offensive coordinator.
Well, after what we saw the last 3 years, it is definitely the most important part.
I will say it is interesting when you look at some of the stuff that Mullen's done. When you look at his quarterbacks, Prescott's played really, really well. Chris Relf had one real good year. Beyond that, the quarterbacks haven't been dynamic. I mean, they've been able to run, but they haven't been fantastic. And so I don't know that, you'll hear people call him a quarterback whisperer. I'm not necessarily sure that that's true, but I think he's going to put his playmakers in a position to try to help the quarterback along. And for somebody like Franks or Corral or anybody else who may come in, I think that's going to be important because there's clearly not a lot of effective experience. We certainly don't have a incumbent starter at quarterback at this point. And so, just competence at that position, especially after that Florida State game, is something that I think is going to be a welcome thing for Florida fans and something that Mullen can provide. But I think anybody expecting him to come in and turn whoever ends up being the starting quarterback into a Heisman candidate, I think that's probably a reach. I think it's going to take probably a hand-picked guy that he's gone out and found, the dual threat guy who fits his system. And, so it might take a couple of years to have a quarterback who's really making things hum.
And I thought I wrote it down and I forgot, but I know he has a highly rated, I believe, 4-star committed right now at Mississippi State. So, I know a lot of people are wondering right now if he would be able to bring him along with him. But, I haven't been able to watch film on the guy or whatever, but I really do forget. I forget his name. So
it's Jalen Maiden. Maiden is a quarterback. He's one of the things working for Florida, if they wanted to go get him, is he's from Texas. So he's not from Mississippi. So he's ranked, according to 247 composite, he's the 278th ranked player nationally. So he's a 4-star quarterback. He's a pretty good player. But not transformative, not Tebow. I mean, Tebow was a 5-star, top 5, top 10 player, but certainly somebody who has committed to Mullen and maybe willing to go with him, because it's not like he's going to Mississippi State because it's right around the corner from his home.
Somebody told me that a certain quarterback in Atlanta followed Mullen on Twitter tonight.
A certain quarterback in Atlanta.
I'm just saying. You have to check that out.
You got to make a call. You got to make it. We'll
have to fact check that one, but that's what I heard.
Yeah. Oh.
Unfortunately, that kind of means we have to root for Georgia next week, doesn't it?
Hell no.
Never,
man.
But it does bring up a good point when we're talking about quarterbacks. And when I went just a second ago and talked about Leak, and at least we know Dan Mullen can at least cater to a quarterback. Now, don't get me wrong. I know the offense under Leak wasn't the best, but it showed a willingness to adapt to what he had and get the job done with that type of quarterback. Now, Fitzgerald, this past year, he's not known as much as a runner as Tebow was or Dak Prescott was either. He was more of a thrower than those guys were. But, you look at Dan Mullen's biggest success and you look at Tebow and you look at Prescott. So, yes, I think the dual threat role and more of a running style quarterback fits what Dan Mullen wants to do. But I don't necessarily, if we're looking at year one, he eventually gets, I think he eventually gets to the dual threat guy where he has the most success. But in year one, maybe he can piece something together enough where this defense, this young defense can take the next step and be a formidable defense. Then I think, he probably can find enough of something. Hey, look, and the schedule is a cakewalk next year, as much of a SEC schedule can be. So we may get a better look than what it really looks like because of the schedule, but it may just fit into what we're looking for. And you guys mentioned it. Hey, you get year one looking good, and these recruits may just start flocking.
Yeah, I just want to see some offensive production. I want to see a patchwork offense. As far as the schedule, and really, I don't even care about that. Year one, just sell your vision to these recruits. It's going to take some work out there. They're going to know if you don't have your quarterback. Hopefully, Corral comes in still or whatever, and you got somebody that shows some promise. Just give us something to believe in. Give the recruits something to believe in, and show me a legitimate top 10 recruiting class, not squeaking in to 10 that gets adjusted down to 11. Break that door down like Florida should in year one. And I'm not talking about this transition class. This is going to be an adventure. I'm talking about your first full class. I want to see a legitimate, hopefully top 5, but at least top 10 recruiting class and load the cupboards and then come out firing in year 2. I don't want to set the bar too high. And I think if fans are looking for this guy to have an offense humming in year one, if they're looking for him to come out and thump all the rivals. And I mean, remember, Urban Meyer had a 9-3 year, and it was tremendous in 2005. I mean, that's fine with me. You get that done, even if it's not that good. I mean, this could be a 6 or 7 win year next year, and that could be a massive improvement. Remember, I mean, don't forget what we're looking at here.
Well, and I think you can – so maybe Franks isn't the right fit for what Mullen wants to do long term, but there were plenty of times where he could have pulled the ball out of his running back's belly and run for a significant amount of time because no one was paying any attention to it. Now, obviously, in a Mullen offense, people are going to start paying attention to it, but when they do, other things are going to open up, which was the whole reason we were asking for them to pull the ball every once in a while, is that it opens things up. So, Franks is not Dan Marino back there. I mean, he's not, and I don't mean passing. I mean from a mobility perspective, he's not Dan Marino back there.
yeah.
But he's not hobbling around back there. He's not slow. He's just not the prototypical fast twitch guy that you'd expect to run in a spread like that. He's not Tony. He's not going to make people miss like that. But I don't know that he has to be competent within the offense. Leak was not. I think Franks is probably a better athlete than Leak was. Yeah. But I think Leak was by far a more accomplished passer at this stage in his career. So, is that complete coaching? I think we're going to know. We're going to know real quick. Just at the progress when you see in game one, I think we'll know real quick, especially if Franks is the one playing, we'll know real quick what the problem was this year and whether it was a combination of player and coach or whether it was much more coaching than it was player.
Hey, about quarterback. Oh, go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to scare people just because McElwain did it, but don't be surprised if Mullen goes out there and gets a grad transfer that fits more of his style of what he's looking for. Look, Franks may not be able to run his offense. Jake Allen may not be able to run this offense. If you keep Corral, I say maybe you don't go that route, and maybe you can keep him back there and build the offense with him in year one. But don't be surprised just because McElwain didn't have good success with it of going to go get a grad transfer or a transfer in that can run this offense.
Yeah.
Listen, about the quarterback situation, it's just light years difference between Mullen and McElwain. I mean, we're talking about a guy that worked with Tim Tebow, first-round draft pick, Heisman winner. Alex Smith, number 1 overall pick. Josh Harris at Bowling Green was a second player ever to have 40 touchdowns rushing and passing in a year, I think it was. He worked with Chris Lee, even though he didn't recruit him. He went out and got Dak Prescott and developed him, put him in the NFL for success. Fitzgerald has looked pretty good at times. I mean, the guy has a tremendous quarterback resume. So I'm confident that, it might be a little bit of a struggle next year. He's going to find his guy, whether that be Corral, whether it be Gatewood, or whether it be Tony or whoever. He's going to find his guy at quarterback.
And Florida fans shouldn't be afraid of a grad transfer so long as the grad transfer fits what he's trying to do. Yeah. I think, Dave, that was your biggest problem with Malik Zaire is they brought in a running quarterback for an offense that just refused to run the ball. Yeah. And so if you're going to – and that was on top of –
Dave, I'm going to start twitching if you keep talking about all their decisions from the McElwain era.
This is it. No more.
Well, here's the last one I'm bringing up. Then is we're watching Jarrett Stidham right now, playing for Auburn, and they didn't jump on that recruitment until much later than they at least had word that he was potentially interested. And so, as long as Mullen's bringing in a guy who makes sense within his offense and what he wants to do, I mean, if he brings in a guy who looks like Ryan Mallett, then I'm going to criticize it because that's not who he wants back there. So then it's just sort of throwing darts at the wall. But if he's got a plan, if he's got a process to build, I don't think people need to be afraid of a grad transfer for a one-year transition, especially if that helps sell the vision like Bill was talking about, that, hey, we've turned a corner now. All we need is this guy to come in, give some people some confidence because, a lot of the things that have happened over the last 3 or 4 weeks are confidence-based, and then a lot of them are depth-based, right, as the injuries and suspensions have taken hold.
Absolutely. Talk about selling the vision, Bill. You said you had some names there that we talked about the staff earlier, but some other guys out there that could come out here with Dan Mullen. We'll get his press conference tomorrow, and I don't think we'll get. Most people listen to this on Monday. The press conference will be later today. But I don't think we'll get much word about staffing members. But who can you see that would be good additions or should be good additions to the staff?
Now, are you talking about guys that he might bring with him, or guys that might look outside of his current staff and Florida for?
Both. I mean, I think it's good. I mean, I kind of think we kind of already discussed, who he might bring with him. But if you got more to add to that, or guys that maybe we're just not even thinking of.
Well, here's the thing. Let's assume they keep 2 assistants from the Florida staff right now. I think that's probably where you put the over/under, because I don't think they'll fire everybody.
Yeah.
Well, Dan Mullen has come in. He's recruited Florida before, so we're going to say he has Florida ties. John Hevesy, same thing, Florida ties. Let's say we keep Sider, Florida ties, ace recruiter in the south of the state. Billy Gonzalez, Florida ties. And then Randy Shannon. Let's say they keep him at like linebacker and co-defensive coordinator, whatever. Well, that gives you 5 guys with Florida ties. So I want to see who they bring in with those guys to help recruit the state, because I just think it's tremendous. But he's got some guys that maybe don't have those in-state ties that I think would be very worthy additions. Brian Baker, defensive line coach, has 14 years experience coaching in the NFL. Coached 8 Pro Bowlers, including Julius Peppers and DeMarcus Ware. That's the kind of guy that, Antonius Clayton and some of these other young defenders are going to look at, and Zuniga, and they're going to be like, man, that's the guy that can get me over the hump and into the NFL. One interesting guy he's got, Terrell Buckley, FSU grad, played in the Super Bowl, 14-year NFL vet. He coaches cornerbacks for them. Remember, we've got an extra assistant coming on board this year, and the way he has it currently set up is he splits cornerbacks and safeties. So maybe they keep Bill at safety and Buckley coaching the corners. That's something to watch for.
Before you move on from him, Bill, I have heard rivals do not want to see that. They do not want to see Buckley at Florida.
I don't think they would. I mean, and you look at just the guys I've mentioned. If you have the guys that 5 guys with Florida ties, and he'd be a 6th guy with Florida ties, obviously, because he's not from there, but he played at FSU.
Yeah.
But with Sider and Buckley, you're starting to put some good ace recruiters together, some guy, and then if you have Baker, now you got some NFL cred. And that's basically what I'm getting at here. I want to see some ace recruiters. I want to see plenty of Florida ties, and I want to see some NFL credentials to sell, because I think that's what the kids want on the recruiting trail. If they're going to look outside, a couple of names I've heard, Larry Scott, the offensive coordinator from Tennessee. He's a guy that has deep ties to the state. I think he was at South Florida for quite a while, and he's a guy that could end up coaching tight ends for them. Maybe be one of those co-offensive coordinators with that label. Let's say Gonzalez leaves or Hevesy doesn't come in. Raymond Woody from Oregon is another one I'd look to. He's one of the top recruiters in the country right now this year, and number 13 in the 24/7 Sports recruiter rankings. Yes, he's in Oregon, but he's from Palmetto, Florida. Was with Taggart at USF coaching linebackers. So if Shannon moves on, maybe he's a guy that would come in and coach linebackers. And then one guy, this is a subject for another show. The special teams were pretty good at Mississippi State. And I won't give you a full breakdown on that. The numbers were actually pretty good. So I don't know that they'll replace their current special teams coordinator. But guys, look to teams that are firing their coaches, because now that's where you guys are looking for jobs. In Texas A&M, you got Jeff Banks. He's currently the number 3 recruiter in the country on the 2018 24/7 Sports Recruiter Index. And their special teams were excellent. They were number 5 in block kicks, number 6 in block punts, number 1 in punt returns, which that helps when you have a dynamic athlete there. 37th in punt return defense. So he's a guy that maybe doesn't have the ties to the state, but if they can bring a special teams coordinator in that can be a dynamo there, I'd be all for that too.
Charlie Partridge.
You mean they're not going to retain? You mean they're not going to retain Nord?
Well, he's being promoted.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Him and us together.
Hey, one other thing.
They're going to continue making the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, by the way.
Another guy that's floating out there that might be looking for jobs is Robert Gillespie. Yeah, the running back coach from Tennessee that's a former Gator running back. So
if they don't keep Sider, that is exactly who I would replace him with.
It could happen. And I'll give a little fuller breakdown as we go forward, but that's just a few names for tonight because we're covering so much stuff.
Yep. I got some Twitter comments that was sent our way. I threw a tweet out there for people's reactions to the hire. So anything else football related or anything before we're going to sign off after that?
That'll work, man. I know we're burning the midnight oil as is, and you daywalkers can't handle it.
We will have another episode later this week, probably Tuesday night. So don't worry. We'll have more breakdown of the Dan Mullen hire, of course. So, let me get to some of the tweets that was sent my way here about the hire on Twitter. So Millie Battison at GatorPest. I'm very concerned about his recruiting chops. So, something we brought up here. Oliver Berry, Matt Corral likes it. That's good enough for me. Can you imagine the Gators with a good quarterback again? Dustin Woolbright, solid hire with a high floor. If he surrounds himself with a staff that can recruit, the sky's the limit. And, guys, before I move on, that is something that I really liked about Dan Mullen. And I think when I made my initial list, he was in my top 2 or 3 guys to get the job, but just because of his background in the SEC at Florida and with quarterbacks. But Dustin brings up a good point. He is a guy, I think, with a high floor. We just don't know what the ceiling quite is yet.
Yeah, that really is. It's the truth. It's well spoken. He's a good coach, but can he be a great one?
Well, what does great look like with the athletes at Florida? I mean, he's been a really good coach at Mississippi State. That means 8 wins. Does essentially, I guess, not average, but does good, not great, look like 10? I mean, at this point, most people I think could take that. Absolutely.
Top Fuel 125. Wasn't sure at first, but like better now. Anything is better than what we endured under Mac, and I think we'll be competitive soon. Andres Rodriguez, disappointed. Look at his record against ranked opponents. We should have gone after Taggart before Mullen. Bill, he called you out. You will show the stats of a mediocre hire.
No, it's not, though. It's not a mediocre hire. I mean, the guy is a winning coach. It's an unknown hire to a certain degree. But like I said, they all are.
Yep.
Because you have to look at it and say, okay, he won 60% of his games. And you're going to look out there with a critical view, a valid one at that, and say, hey, he didn't win a lot of big games. He didn't win a title. But I would counter that the context shows that, hey, that he probably did better than anybody else has done at that school. Going all the way back, I think Dan Mullen is probably the best performing Mississippi State coach in the program's history. He took them to new heights, into a number 1 ranking. He's put players in the NFL. and he has won big games. You know, that was somebody. And please forgive me, whoever you are out there, because I had to work tonight. I didn't really get to look at my tweets and say that, show me where he ever won a big game. Well, in 2014, he beat 3 ranked opponents, and they were like top 10 opponents in the conference there. Sorry, I'm looking for my notes here to see who it was.
Auburn, Texas A&M, and LSU.
That's right. Number 8, number 6, and number 2.
Yep.
Mississippi State. That does not happen. To beat 3 top 10 opponents in that conference with the quality they were. Look, the guy has a chance to succeed at Florida. All of you out there that are on the fence about this, I don't ever tell people how to enjoy their football. I don't ever tell people how to view something. It's for you to decide. But for me, as a critical person, I think there's a chance this guy could really be special at Florida. But is it a sure thing? Absolutely not. Are your criticisms, are your questions valid? Absolutely. Just for me, I'm going to err on the side of having fun with it because, man, I'm glad we made a change.
Well, and I look at it and say he spent 9 years at Mississippi State, and one of the big questions about people like Kelly and Frost were, where are they going to be 3-4 years from now? Are they going to be looking for the next step in their career? It doesn't look like Mullen's that kind of guy. Now, maybe he doesn't want to spend the next 20 years at Florida, but it doesn't seem like he's going to look to bail for an NFL job 3 or 4 years from now, just based on what we've seen. Now, I mean, if he is bailing for an NFL job 3 or 4 years from now, I think we're all very, very happy with where the program is and the quality of play, because if the NFL comes calling for him, it'll mean that Florida's winning and winning big.
And not to mention the fact he's 45 years old, right? Is he just 45?
45.
The guy's been at Mississippi State for 9 years already, and he's still a young coach. You go through a full five-year cycle. Let's say and let's just be ridiculous right now. Let's just say he wins a national championship at Florida, year 4 or 5. The guy's only 50. He's got forever to go. So if he does want to make a home here, it could turn into a Saban thing. Yes, I know I'm being ridiculous right now. I'm just saying.
Well, we do know where his wife won't be. Publix in Gainesville. So.
Well, they didn't have Peapod back in 2008. So
right.
now they've got that. She can just have the groceries delivered to the house.
I'd just like to point out, if the rumors are true about his salary, they're not going to have to do their own grocery shopping anymore.
You're right. If that is the rumors right now, I can't confirm it. I am hearing $7 million a year, but I don't know. It's not out there really a lot right now. So maybe we'll get confirmation with the press conference and everything coming up. So
maybe if I become their grocery dude, that I can get an inside source with them.
There we go.
But, you get the Publix warehouse on your way on I-10 from Jacksonville to Gainesville.
That's right.
So
that's true.
A few more here. Natural Works has a lot of interaction with us on Twitter. He knows what to expect at Florida. He's not scared or intimidated. He's gone toe-to-toe with SEC giants and didn't flinch. He's confident in his abilities and will prove it at Florida. Pointing up to titles he helped win would be a big-time selling points to recruits. Sarah Higgins, I'm excited about Mullen. He knows the expectations at Florida and will be able to deal with them, unlike our last couple of coaches. A few more. Stephen Carcello, I can live with it. It's not a grand slam or a home run by any means. It's a simple, solid triple with the potential of stealing home. Wanted him here 3 years ago. MMA Josh Emery, confused and on the fence. Worst case scenario, I think he can fix the brand and make us look competitive and competent. Not sure he's a championship caliber coach, but I hope to be proven wrong. And Gator Ron, well, maybe the third one will be a winner from the blogs and tweets I read today. I agree. A lot of great coaches don't want a job in the SEC. A large percentage of fans are irate if you don't win every game. So, that kind of speaks to why some people didn't think Dan Mullen would come to Florida. We talked about his wife's comments, relationships with the UAA from his past time here. But I think with Scott Strickland as the athletic director, he got his guy after, of course, Kelly and probably Frost turned him down. He was comfortable with Dan Mullen, and it kind of moved pretty fast, I think, once he reached out to Dan Mullen.
Is it in bad form if I make Cousin Eddie jokes moving forward?
I've seen them in other places, so you might as well.
I will put a moratorium as long as I'm going to give you 2 years, Dan. Get the forward passing attack going, and I won't make a Cousin Eddie joke.
I give him 6 months, Dave. I give him 6 months.
Yeah, we'll have to go back and unless Will, you can talk about it right quick. You had an article today about how Scott Strickland has handled the coaching search. That was before Dan Mullen was named head coach at Florida. Does this alleviate any of the concerns or the like of Scott Strickland finding a head coach?
I mean, I think given the circumstances, getting Mullen is a pretty big deal here, especially decisively before the early signing period. My biggest concern was the leaks that were coming out of the UAA. I mean, I don't remember there being this much information out there, like there was about Kelly, like there was about Frost back when Foley was hiring McElwain. Now, obviously, that didn't turn out real well from a Florida perspective.
Until he was in Colorado.
But the concern was that Frost turns him down. Obviously, they got turned down by Kelly, and now you're sitting there going, okay, you're going to your third or fourth choice, and the fan base was not going to be pleased with Norvell. And Norvell is a very, very good coach, but I don't think they were going to be pleased with him. Half the fan base wasn't going to be pleased with Taggart. Now half the fan base isn't going to be pleased with Mullen. There's not going to be a very long rope for the coach because of the way the coaching search went. Because everyone's going to say, well, if we'd gotten Chip Kelly, and the heat's really going to get ramped up if UCLA turns a corner halfway through year one or in year two, and Florida's still struggling somehow. So, you mentioned the money that's coming Mullen's way allegedly, and that's one of the downside to the passionate fan base is that you hear all the noise, but the upside to the passionate fan base is you get paid because those passionate fans expect the administration to pony up to get the top tier candidate in there. And so, Mullen decided it was worth it to deal with some of those things that maybe are not necessarily the most pleasant thing to deal with. But, I mean, the Gator fan base is passionate and they're also knowledgeable. For the most part, it's not a bunch of people who don't know anything who are out there spouting nonsense. It's people who looked at the product on the field this year and the past 3 years and just said, this is garbage. Like, why?
Yeah, it's not Tennessee fans.
So I have no idea how to respond to that other than good job, Bill. Good job.
No, I think Schiano backed out because they tried to give him Confederate money or something, and he was like, I can't accept this. This doesn't count.
Oh man, what a question that is.
Yeah, I mean, we could be Tennessee, I suppose, is the silver lining in all of this stuff. But
let me just say this, just about the fiasco, and I know a lot of fans. And a lot of people that have attempted to keep kept up with what's going on with Gator football and the coaching search are feeling kind of probably disenfranchised because the whole way the Kelly information went down, because just about everybody had heard that Kelly was going to be the guy, and they passed that along. And we kind of got one foot in the door, and there were some people that called and said, "This is it, it's done." And I was on the verge because we were hearing it from so many angles. But I do just want to point out that what happened here is these leaks were coming from the University of Florida and people surrounding that program. And the reason that the information ended up, it wasn't bad information because they did chase Kelly and they did go after him. And the people that were reporting on that the whole time were right. But the University of Florida lost out. It just, they thought they had him. And so they were telling the people associated with the program were saying, we got him. Well, they didn't have him as much as they think they did. And so the egg kind of ended up on their faces. That's no fun, but, regardless of what you think, they went out and got a guy. And so I would just encourage, again, I don't tell people how to enjoy it, but I think we should give the guy a chance. That's just me.
Absolutely. I mean, his past speaks for itself in certain areas, especially out Florida. Success with quarterbacks. Success on offense. Yes, we'd like to see some more ranked wins. Yes, we'd like to see some big wins. And hopefully with a Florida roster, the type of players he can recruit at Florida, maybe we see Dan Mullen turn the corner as a head coach and becomes one of the elite head coaches in college football. Anything else, guys?
Florida's up by 8 on Duke right now. So
yeah. Yep. Hopefully by the time everybody listens
to this. Not running a third and long play action. I like that. We may never see that again.
We snuck it in one more time.
Thank God.
Oh, good God. So long, Nussmeier. So long.
It reminds me of that. It reminds me of that movie on Major League when the guy was like, "Up yours, Joe Boo. I'll do it myself."
Oh my God! I'm so glad. I am so happy. I can't say it enough.
Yeah, guys, I'm beside myself happy. You don't know. I've been fighting for this for so long, trying to tell people like it's wrong, and now it might be finally right. So
there we go. Now more things to be excited about. Dan Mullen, head coach of the Florida Gators. Remember, you can find Bill Sykes on Twitter at Real B Sykes. Find Will Miles on Twitter at Will Miles SEC. You can find his work at SEC Country as well. I'm your host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. We will have another episode later this week, breaking down the hire some more. We'll get Dan Mullen's press conference on Monday. We'll discuss and break all that down on Tuesday and some more numbers as well. So guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.